Welcome to One Way to Machines and the B7 Audi RS4 series.
Alright, so bowl of water, splash it on with the glove, 800 grit on a piece of foam, and we're going to get started with the fog lights. I'm not going to do the insides of the headlights just because I want to get the car back on the road sooner. It is only the passenger side headlight that fogs up, 5% of the time, so we can deal with that later, but we'll check the vent to see if there's any bugs inside, as there were bugs inside of the Volvo headlight, and that solved the condensation issue. Alright, so don't get scared if it gets all hazy on you. We started on this one. Have a dry rags to get the mixture of whatever factory clear coat and the white water off. You also want to go only back and forth. I don't care if you get to the corners and you think you want to go around, back and forth, even if it's the smallest motion and with the force of the piece of gym mat, because your fingers will push too far. Main key, always keep it wet, keep your sandpaper wet, and make sure the water you're working with is clean, and reapply as you go. It's going to take a while if you're doing it by hand. Alright, so the headlights flipped upside down, and the drain is stealthy as German style, but you can see the crud from the outside. Let's see what I pull out of it. Alright, so the drain just pulls out. There were some cobwebs in there, but there's an intricate system inside there which limits the amount of air even going in and out of this vent. So those cobwebs could have been causing some kind of limiting function to the moisture coming out. I just got inside this passageway with a pick, and there was just some cobwebs. It probably goes further in. There could be something stuck in there, but this is as far as we're going to go for this part of the headlight series. Where I'm shining the light there, that looks like there should be another vent there, but that's just missing on this headlight. So let's bring the other one and see what it looks like. Alright, so the one on the left I haven't touched yet, but as you can see, the same passageway does not have a vent. So I guess it's not a vent. When you poke a pick in there, there is some resistance, so I'm not trying to bust through there. But yeah, both of the headlights are like that on this car. You can see how much dirt there is on this vent. Let's see what happens when we take it out. Alright, so you can see there's a little cobweb in there. This usually you'd think it's not a big deal, but if I can get this to focus, okay, that's as good as it's gonna get. But in there, there's a flap system that lets a minuscule amount of air go through, and that can get cobwebs and whatnot in there. There's a little bit of dirt that fell on the table when I removed it. But with the minor cleaning of these two, it'll be interesting to see if the condensation problems are completely gone. Alright, so I just shot a bit of Windex through there. It won't damage anything, and it'll break up all the grit that's inside there too. Not too much, then just flush it out with some water. You see, this is why you gotta be careful with body shops your car goes to. This is not under my ownership, but you can see the work that they did was so shoddy in a way that there's paint on the bottom lip of this headlight. A little bit of it comes over onto the lens, but a professional body shop should not have done things like this. Even on this one, you can see residual paint. If things are properly taped, this should never happen. You see the little square at the top right of your corner? This one here in the middle with the cobweb in it. And then our drain, there it is for reference. You can see on this one, we have the same configuration, obviously. Now, I don't know if those two squares are vents or not, but there's some cobwebs and crud in both of them on both headlights. So if there's multiple vents, I'm going to clean those out with picks as best as I can. And I can see some visible small holes, so they probably are vents, but just clean them out in any case, okay, whether they are or not. Alright, so trying to stick a piece of wire through those squares I just spoke about, nothing is going through that hole that you can't see into. So these are probably just some kind of bump stops. So don't worry about them too much. Alright, so I'm just going to keep going at this headlight for the next couple days, anytime I have an hour or two. And just make sure your water is always clean, your sandpaper is fully wet, and your headlight is wet. As soon as you get milky residue, wipe it off with a rag. Cycle through your rags as the white residue will dry up on them and they'll become saturated. So yeah, and you can dip the whole foam and sandpaper in the water and it'll be a bit smoother in case the foam catches a little bit from the edges of your sandpaper. But make sure your sandpaper is like this, and don't drag it on the table. I needed to because I had the camera. But then you use this curved edge, okay? Never let these edges catch, okay? They can leave nasty marks. You want to have the fully curved edge, and you want to put pressure on the center of the foam pad back and forth, just like this, and cycle through your water. I'll do this with my tripod later, but my one hand is holding the headlight firm the whole time, and I'm pressing with the other hand, full pressure, 4 fingers, okay, across. Don't be lighthearted with this. You gotta really press hard into the surface, and it still takes a while when you do it by hand. And this is why you use the dorky gloves. You see, there's gonna be so much water on the table and on the headlight that this stuff is going to drip down, and it will get onto the floor too, okay? So you just gotta sit strategically and manage this job. And after you've used your sandpaper for about 20 minutes to half an hour, flipped on both sides, during that 20 to 30 minutes, switch your piece of sandpaper because it'll start losing its effectiveness and you're just gonna waste a lot more time. Just make sure when you put that fresh piece of sandpaper on, you're even more alert with how much water you have on there, because it will etch harder if it's dry, and you will get into a habit of starting to press harder once your sandpaper wears down. So you got to adjust that. All right, so while I let that fresh piece soak a little bit, I want to give you a bit more information on the piece of foam mat. So most of yours will be dirty like mine. You just have to cut this amount of a piece and then use some Windex to clean off your piece before you start using it. As you can see, I cut off 2 of the corner pieces flush because that straight edge is what I use to rub against the headlight, and those 2 nubs will get in the way, so cut those off. But that's about how much of a corner it is off of a standard gym mat. You see, the first pass with a fresh piece gets a lot of residue. The soaking isn't really necessary with this 3M stuff. It doesn't really soak up. It's an interesting material. So the more important thing is so wet it with your glove, the headlight, then right before you put the fresh piece on, make sure to dip it in water and carry it over quickly and get started. The duration of how long you use a fresh piece is far shorter than as the piece gets worn, because this will push the water out and get a lot of material off, and you have a risk of dry scratching the headlight if you're not very attentive to how much water you put and your intervals are too long. So short intervals for a fresh piece. All right, gonna call it a wrap soon for tonight, but this is what the headlights will look like during the process. I'm going to 800 grit everything before I go to my higher grit sandpapers. I will make the next video as we go through the other phases of sandpaper.